The next generation may be more popular, but Star Trek Discovery has it beat in one specific way. For nearly 6 decades, Star Trek has evolved across generations of fans, tones, and technologies. When Star Trek The Next Generation TNG premiered in 1987, it reignited the franchise with a vision of optimism, diplomacy, and philosophical storytelling that defined the late 20th century era of Trek. Captain Jean-Luc Picard and his crew became icons, not just of science fiction, but of cultural leadership, moral complexity, and futuristic humanism. Yet, decades later, another Star Trek series, Discovery, dared to challenge that legacy. Premiering in 2017 on Paramount Plus, Star Trek Discovery was the franchise's first streaming-era show and immediately split opinion among longtime Trekkies. While The Next Generation remains the more popular series by almost every measurable metric, ratings, longevity, and cultural affection, Discovery surpasses it in one very specific, crucial way: emotional storytelling through character-centered evolution. The Next Generation's perfection versus Discovery's humanity. The Next Generation was built on Roddenberry's utopian vision that humanity had moved beyond conflict, prejudice, and pettiness. It was a world where disagreements were intellectual, not emotional, where officers like Picard and Riker debated ethics, not egos. The series excelled at exploring abstract moral dilemmas, the nature of artificial life in The Measure of a Man, the morality of intervention in Pen Pals, or the nature of individuality in I, Borg. But this approach often came at the cost of deep, ongoing emotional arcs. The characters were largely static, idealized representations of future humanity rather than psychologically complex individuals. Episodes reset each week, and personal struggles were rarely carried forward. The bridge crew of the Enterprise D functioned almost perfectly as a unit, rarely succumbing to ego, trauma, or interpersonal fracture. Star Trek Discovery, by contrast, thrives on imperfection. It's a series where emotion isn't just present, it's the engine of the story. From Michael Burnham's early mutiny in the pilot to her emotional breakdowns, friendships, and found family bonds across the seasons, Discovery places its characters' inner worlds front and center. Where TNG showed us a polished ideal of humanity, Discovery dares to show us humanity in progress, flawed, messy, grieving, hopeful, and endlessly striving. That is the specific way Discovery surpasses The Next Generation. It captures the human heart of Starfleet more authentically than any previous show. Michael Burnham, the franchise's most emotionally raw captain. Jean-Luc Picard was cerebral, a diplomat philosopher who represented the intellect of humanity at its best. Michael Burnham, on the other hand, represents its emotional intelligence. From the beginning, Burnham's arc is defined by internal contradictions. Raised by Vulcans yet ruled by emotion, she's the first Star Trek protagonist to begin her journey disgraced. Her mutiny against Captain Georgiou in the pilot episode is not a rational act. It's a deeply human one, driven by fear, guilt, and desperate hope. In one episode, she dismantles her Starfleet career. In another, she begins rebuilding her soul. This emotional volatility became a hallmark of Discovery's tone, something critics and fans either loved or found alienating. But viewed through the broader lens of storytelling evolution, Burnham's expressiveness marks a radical shift for Star Trek. She is not an ideal, she's a person. She cries, breaks down, apologizes, and learns, not just through philosophy, but through pain and empathy. Burnham's leadership journey ultimately becomes a reflection of what Starfleet stands for at its most personal level, not perfection, but progress. Her emotional transparency and moral vulnerability redefine what it means to command in the modern Star Trek era. In that sense, Discovery took TNG's cerebral optimism and infused it with heart, trauma, healing, and found family. If The Next Generation explored a future where humanity had conquered its darker impulses, Discovery explores a future where those impulses still exist but are confronted head-on. Across its seasons, Discovery has navigated grief and trauma more deeply than any Star Trek before it. Burnham's guilt over Georgiou's death, Saru's fear of his own biology and transformation, Stamets and Culber's grief and reunion after death, Book's anguish after losing his homeworld of Quagian. These aren't small, episodic struggles. They're emotional through lines that shape the character's every choice. By allowing its crew to process trauma together, Discovery gave new meaning to the found family concept at the heart of Star Trek. The bridge crew isn't just a team, it's a support system. Emotional scenes, Burnham hugging Tilly after a failure, Stamets reassuring Adira of their worth, Saru's empathy guiding others through crises, reveal a kind of shared vulnerability that the next generation often kept at arm's length. While TNG characters loved each other in principle, they rarely expressed that love openly. Discovery changed that. Its emotional vocabulary, one of affection, validation, and genuine care, resonates with modern audiences who see leadership not as command, but as connection, representation, and identity. Emotional authenticity on a broader scale. Star Trek has always been about representation, but Discovery elevates it through emotional authenticity. The next generation's representation was groundbreaking in its time. Strong women like Crusher and Troy, diverse casting, and allegories for social issues, but the show was still bound by 20th century television limitations. Emotional expression was often subdued, identity was rarely explored in personal terms. Discovery breaks that mold completely. It became the first Star Trek series with an openly gay couple in Paul Stamets and Hugh Culber, whose love story became one of the emotional anchors of the entire series. Later, Adira Tull, a non-binary character, and Gray, a trans character, joined, and their inclusion was handled not as tokenism, but as lived experience, complete with the same emotional focus given to any other crew member. Every relationship on Discovery, romantic, platonic, or familial, is infused with empathy. It's a show that encourages its characters to name their feelings, confront their vulnerabilities, and support each other without shame. That emotional authenticity makes Discovery not just progressive in casting, but in the way it teaches empathy. Where the next generation intellectualized humanism, Discovery emotionalized it. The future as a place of healing. Perhaps the clearest example of Discovery's emotional superiority comes from its leap into the 32nd century. In Season 3, the crew travels nearly 1,000 years into the future, leaving behind everything and everyone they know. It's a narrative choice that doubles as a metaphor for grief and rebirth. The Federation they find is fractured, the universe disconnected after the burn. Rather than rebuilding with pure logic and protocol, Burnham and her crew heal the galaxy through compassion, understanding, and trust. This shift reframes Star Trek's utopia not as something static, but as something that must be continually rebuilt through empathy. The next generation showed us the destination of that journey. Discovery shows us the emotional labor required to get there. By turning the Federation's restoration into an act of collective healing, Discovery embodies a modern truth. The future doesn't just need intelligence, it needs heart. Critics versus connection. Why Discovery's emotion matters. It's no secret that Discovery has faced intense criticism, especially from older fans who grew up on the stoic professionalism of Picard's crew. Some argue that its emotional focus makes it melodramatic, or that characters spend too much time crying and hugging. But this critique misses